Welcome to the deep dive. In the world of global business, we spend so much time on trade wars, earnings, supply chains. But the single most fundamental thing, the thing that shapes a country's entire operating environment, is something we talk about a lot less. Its constitution.
It's the OS, right? The foundational rule book. It dictates who has power, how fast the rules can change, and, well, how predictable your investment really is.
Exactly. And when you commit capital to another country, you're not just betting on next quarter, you're making a bet on the stability of that rule book for the next 20 years.
And if you're looking at, the US, Taiwan, and mainland China, these three massive interconnected economies, understanding their constitutional blueprints is the ultimate shortcut to assessing systemic risk.
So that's our mission today. We're taking a look at comparative reports, risk assessments from our source material, and we're translating that high-level political theory into practical insights for you, the learner. We're comparing these three constitutional architectures to see how their different approaches to power affect everything from legal enforcement to your investment decisions.
Okay, let's do it.
So let's start at the absolute beginning, the philosophical source of authority. If the Constitution is the operating system, who wrote the original code?
And you see a huge split right away. For both the US and Taiwan, the foundation is the sovereignty of the people, the idea that power comes from the citizens.
Right. The U.S. Constitution kicks off with that famous phrase, "We the people."
Correct. And Taiwan's is built on Sun Yat-sen's three principles of the people. So in both systems, the code says the Constitution is supreme. It's the rule of law. This document is meant to limit the government, to restrain state power. It's the bedrock.
The bedrock that ensures things like property rights stick around even when the politics change. So the state is bound by the law. Now, how does that compare to mainland China?
It's a sharp contrast. In China, the core principle, especially since 2018, is the leadership of the party. And this isn't some hidden thing. It's explicit. The 2018 amendment literally says the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party is the most essential feature of their governing structure.
That's more than just a political statement. That's a systemic declaration.
It is. And the crucial insight here for any business is that the Constitution is seen as an instrument, a tool. It's a tool to legalize and enforce what the party wants to do. It's not a barrier designed to restrain the state.
So that creates a kind of dual reality for companies on the ground.
Exactly. Following the written law is absolutely necessary. You have to do it. But it is never sufficient. You have to constantly be monitoring the political will because that can supersede the entire legal framework.
Okay, so if the philosophies are that different, how do the structures actually function? Let's use the analogies from the sources to unpack the architecture of power.
Let's start with the U.S. The architecture is checks and balances, and the analogy is, well, a continuous game of rock, paper, scissors.
Based on the theory that power is inherently dangerous, so you have to split it up and make the parts compete.
Precisely. You've got three independent, often adversarial branches: Congress, the President, the Supreme Court. Congress makes laws. The President can veto them.
And the Supreme Court can declare them unconstitutional. They're designed for friction.
Constant, perpetual friction.
But doesn't that friction become a huge problem for you, the learner? That sounds, really slow, really costly.
And it is. That's the trade-off. It's designed for stability, not speed. That friction stops rapid policy swings, which is great for long-term planning, but it also creates massive transaction costs and uncertainty. A single regulation can be tied up in court for a decade.
And that's just the horizontal axis. We can't forget federalism, which complicates it vertically.
Oh, absolutely. That's the vertical check. Businesses have to deal with dual sovereignty. The federal government, and then 50 state governments, each with their own tax codes, their own environmental rules. It's why, as the sources note, you see all this strategic registration places like Delaware or Nevada. You have to be an expert in dozens of legal systems, not just one.
Okay, let's jump over to Taiwan. The structure is totally unique. It's called functional division. The analogy I saw was like the large company, designed for efficiency.
Yeah, the goal is cooperative governance through 5 specialized branches, the 5 yuans. They have the familiar executive, legislative, and judicial. But then they added 2 others, and these come from literally thousands of years of Chinese governance practice.
Okay, so the first is the examination yuan. What's its role today?
It manages all the civil service recruitment. It's basically the constitutional guarantor of a professional, non-political bureaucracy. So for a business, that means when you're dealing with a government agency, the official got their job through merit, not political connections. It minimizes the risk of, arbitrary decisions.
A constitutional safeguard against cronyism.
Right. And then the second unique one is the control yuan or supervisory yuan orderland.
Which is like the old imperial censorate system.
Exactly, just modernized. It handles impeachment, censure, auditing. It's constitutionally mandated to watch the watchers. It provides this formal, nonpartisan oversight, which again means more predictability and lower regulatory risk for businesses.
Now, the sources mention the additional articles of the Constitution. It sounds like they did a major system upgrade.
That's a perfect way to put it. They used what's basically a kernel patch, the constitutional additional articles, to update the core system without junking the whole thing. That's how they pragmatically added key features like direct presidential elections into the older framework. It shows this willingness to adapt while keeping the core text. It's a really functional hybrid system.
All right, so finally, mainland China's architecture, democratic centralism. If the U.S. is friction, China is all about unity.
Total unity. The analogy here is the board of directors and the CEO team. The system explicitly rejects the separation of powers. The core idea is unity of deliberation and execution.
So in this analogy, the party is the strategic board of directors. But what about the National People's Congress, the NPC? Nominally, they're the highest power.
Nominally, they're the shareholders' meeting. But in practice, yeah, almost every analyst sees them as a rubber stamp. Their job is to legalize and ratify decisions that have already been made by the party leadership. The executive team, the state council, the new National Supervisory Commission, the courts, they all just execute that single, unified will of the party. The policy speed you can get from that is something the U.S. system can't even imagine.
Okay, this contrast brings up the single most important question for our listener. What does this friction versus unity mean for the reliability of a contract? For your day-to-day operations, when something goes wrong, where do you turn?
And this is where we get in practical risk management. In the U.S. and Taiwan, you turn to an independent judiciary. U.S. Supreme Court judges get lifetime tenure. Taiwan's constitutional court judges have long, fixed terms. They can literally overturn political decisions. So you get high legal predictability. The contract is king.
But the sources say we have to totally flip our risk assessment for China.
You have to. The core finding from all the comparative legal analysis is this. For businesses in China, policy risk is higher than legal risk. And that requires a complete mental shift for any Western compliance team.
Okay, can you give us a tangible example? Why is a policy change a bigger threat than, say, a legal violation?
It all comes down to the judiciary not being independent. The courts, even the highest ones, operate under the party's political legal committee. So imagine this scenario. A foreign company has a breach of contract dispute with a big state-owned enterprise, an SOE. Your contract is ironclad. Perfect. But if the party or the local government decides that ruling for the SOE is necessary to, say, stabilize local employment or advance some national strategic interest, that political goal could easily become the decisive factor, not the clear legal text of your contract.
So the court's decision is prioritizing the political agenda of the day over the actual law.
That's it. And this threat is actually baked into the Constitution through something the sources call the pocket clause.
A pocket clause.
Yeah.
That sounds incredibly ambiguous.
It is the ultimate legal loophole. Article 51 of the Constitution says citizens, and by extension companies, can only exercise their rights if they do not harm the interests of the state, society, or the collective. The language is intentionally vague. It's an open-ended constitutional permission slip for the state to do whatever it needs to do.
So if your business suddenly falls out of favor with the latest 5-year plan, maybe it has to do with data or the environment, the state can just invoke this clause to legally justify disrupting your entire operation.
Yes, even if you were following every single law on the books yesterday. The implication for you, the learner, is critical. You can be 100% compliant today. But a sudden shift in what the party defines as the interests of the state can legally override all of that tomorrow.
Let's pivot now to the direct implications of that power concentration. The 2018 constitutional amendments in China seem like a really clear signpost for this trajectory. What did those changes mean for long-term risk?
They signaled a clear path toward even greater power concentration, and they created new enforcement tools that directly impact businesses. The most famous change, of course, was abolishing the presidential 2-term limit.
Which institutionalized leadership continuity, but I imagine at a pretty high cost for investors.
A huge cost. It dramatically increased what we call key person risk. When all major strategic decisions flow from a single leader, the country's entire long-term stability becomes dependent on that one person's agenda, their health, their tenure. It makes the future far more uncertain than in a system where power is distributed and institutionalized.
And the other big institutional shift was creating the National Supervisory Commission, the NSC.
The NSC is a very powerful body. It was set up right alongside the State Council, and it formalized and nationalized anti-corruption and regulatory enforcement. Going back to our analogy, the NSC is like the internal investigation and enforcement arm of the party's board of directors. It adds this new, very strong layer of compliance pressure that often operates outside the normal legal channels.
Okay, so given this whole environment where political signals matter more than legal code, what's the strategic advice? For someone operating in or thinking about the Chinese market, how do you mitigate this unique kind of risk?
The first move is to fundamentally change how you gather intelligence. You have to shift resources from just legal analysis towards political intelligence. Your compliance teams need to be tracking things like personnel appointments, central committee decisions, what's being said in the People's Daily. You have to try and predict policy shifts before they become law.
So you're hiring political analysts, not just regulatory lawyers. And what about protecting your investment contractually?
The second thing, and this is probably most critical, is to optimize your contract structure. You have to prioritize international enforcement. When you can, negotiate dispute resolution clauses that mandate using an authoritative international arbitration venue outside of mainland China. So think Singapore, Hong Kong, Geneva. Using a third-party arbitrator is really the most effective tool you have to get around the risks of local judicial non-independence.
And finally, I guess just preparing for the shocks you know are possible.
You have to be constantly running stress tests. You just can't assume the legal status quo will hold. You have to run scenarios. What if the government mandates 80% localization of your supply chain tomorrow? What if new cybersecurity rules target you? You have to test your resilience against political shocks, not just market ones.
This has been a fascinating deep dive. So to recap briefly, we've got the U.S. model, which is all about balance through conflict, the Taiwan model, which is about efficiency through specialized division, and the China model, which is about unity and speed through concentrated party leadership.
And that summary really captures the core choice. It all boils down to this. Are you operating in a system where the rulebook is designed to bind the state, or one where the rulebook is an instrument of the state? And that one question dictates whether your primary risk management tool should be a lawyer focused on clear rules or a political analyst focused on a shifting center of power.
It really makes you rethink what stability even means in a global context. We focus on trade deals, but maybe the real stability of your long-term investment depends on how hard it is to actually change the Constitution.
That's a fantastic place to leave it. The U.S. and Taiwan have these incredibly high thresholds for constitutional change. It takes massive majorities, referendums, both. China has a low threshold. It essentially just requires the party's will to be ratified. So here's a provocative thought for you to explore on your own. Given that huge difference, which legal framework offers the truest guarantee of property rights over the next 20 years?